Hello everyone. For our next project we're going to be talking about drawing the cylinder and the elliptical form, which is essentially a circle in perspective. So the blue line there kind of indicates what I'm talking about in terms of the ellipse. Essentially it's just the circle as you're looking at it across the plane. So when you do draw elliptical form, what you got to keep in mind is that the two furthest points out always have to be on a horizontal line from one another, straight across. And then the 2 points up and down on the ellipse, right above one another, have to line up as well, the 2 highest and lowest points, or the 1 highest and lowest point. So this is how you gain symmetry, or symmetrical look to the cylinder or the ellipse. In this case it's a tapered cylinder, a bowl, so the bottom is a elliptical form as well. If you could see the other side, you'd see the whole circle. Otherwise it's you just see the front half. And drawing the circle in perspective is really a very difficult thing. People tend to want to make it more circular than it actually is. When you break it down, it's essentially a symmetrical shape. So the right side, the right half of it is equal to the left half. And you can kind of, as you draw them, you can kind of in your mind go back and forth and see if you are creating, it's a mirror image of course, right? But are you keeping those two equal halves equal when you draw the ellipse? And then also there's essentially a front-back relationship that's symmetrical as well. The back half tends to be a little bit smaller than the front, a little shorter just because of perspective. But for our purposes, we're going to say that the front half and the back half of the ellipse are equal. Likewise, the left and the right side of the lower, in this case, the lower part of the bowl would be equal to one another as well. So you can see how important it is to think about this sort of shape, this tapered cylinder, in regards to symmetry, right? Left equal right, only in a mirrored form. So what happens too is that the opening changes its shape as you elevate your view. Okay, so that's one thing that you need to think about. What is the how much of the actual opening are you seeing? One way to determine that is to measure the height of the cylinder and walk it across the width. In this case it's a 1 to 3. So I'm getting 1 walking across 3 times to find out how wide versus how tall the cylinder is. But that doesn't kind of solve the problem of how to determine how open that circle is, or ellipse. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to kind of imagine using the camera here, elevating our head, our view, relative to the bowl, relative to the tapered cylinder. And you'll see there's a way to determine how much that has opened up. It's not a full, obviously not a full circle, it's still elliptical, but we see more of the inside of the bowl, right? What hasn't changed is the width of it, okay? The left to right dimension hasn't changed, but what has changed is the front to back dimension, or height of it, I'd like to say. So in this case, the height is equal to 1, 2, 3. So if you're looking at this bowl, all you do is take your pencil and do visual measurement and walk it across and see how many heights fit across the width. And then when you start drawing your drawing, you can act that out on your drawing. You make sure that the front to back versus the width is appropriate. So let's see, when we move it up, we get a little bit higher view yet. There's the height. What hasn't changed really is the width. Now I have that fitting across that how many times? 1 and then some, right? So it's not a 1-to-1 yet. If it were a 1-to-1, it'd be a full circle. Let's try it. Let's go up a little higher. So kind of looking down, I'm going to be making a drawing in a subsequent video, which will the drawing will represent this sort of view, an elevated view of the bowl. In this case, we have the 1, front to back. Let's see how many times that fits across the width. 1. And there's 2, so 1.5. Okay, so front to back fits across width 1.5 times. So as we move up, we elevate our view, the width is not changing, the lateral dimension is not changing, but the front to back dimension is changing. Still not a full circle, right? There's still perspective involved. So it's really important to determine that front to back versus width when we make a drawing. Now I'm going to do a quick sketch here using as a reference that image in the upper left-hand corner. Excuse me. We start out with our horizontal. I'm kind of imagining the opening, right? So we want to start out with our horizontal and our vertical. And then just kind of gently map in the elliptical form, right? It's going to take a while to really figure it out. So the image in the upper left-hand corner is a 1 to about 3 relationship. So I'm getting a front to back fitting across the width about 3 times. So that's what those marks are on the axes, right? On the vertical and the horizontal axes. Now those marks I'm making there are straight lines that let me know that that arc that I'm going to make for the front and the back have to meet in the middle at only one place on that straight line, on those straight lines, okay? You can't go down and hit the line and then run along the line. It has to hit one place and one place only for the elliptical form to be correct. So there's the basic proportion of the image up in the upper left-hand corner. Now it kind of looks like a football now, or an almond, or an eyeball, right? I haven't really honed the shape yet, but I'm getting just the overall proportions here. So there's kind of the wedge shape, right? The tapered cylinder look of the bowl. So I went in with my straight edge and kind of cut that in. And note that the bottom cylinder, or the bottom curve, half would be on the left side of the vertical line and half would be on the other right side, so it's going to maintain that. Now notice how I kind of arc that down, right? See that curve, how I curve that down and erased? That's gently rounding it more, right? So it doesn't look as much like the football or almond shape, you know. Still needs a lot of work, of course, but so when you do draw an ellipse, you know, a circle, opening a bowl, a glass, or whatever, it's virtually impossible to do it in one stroke. You're going to have to finesse it over a long period of time. Sketch, you know, a series of sketched lines that you then erase, you know, erase away to create a singular line eventually. Kind of see how this works here. Now notice when I'm drawing, I'm using my wrist and my arm as kind of a pivot point, way to as a way to create that sense of arc. Can't just do it with your fingers. You have to kind of use the whole hand and the whole arm. So there's the 1 point, there's the 1 point. It can only hit 1 point along those straight lines I just put in there. So I can't take that down and hit the line and run along the line and then go back up. I have to kind of gently, you know, guide the arc until it just hits at 1 point along those 4 edges there. Now I'm kind of thinking about tonality here, starting to get a sense of light and dark going. And the light in this scenario is coming kind of from left back a little bit, just a little bit. So the front of the bowl is kind of in shadow. And as I draw this, I'm erasing away and kind of starting to show a little bit of thickness of the bowl, right? No, it's not just a thin. So you got to kind of think about the lip of the opening, giving a sense of mass to that. Still kind of pointy there, I'll kind of round it out eventually, but notice what I'm doing. I'm not just relying on outline here. I'm starting to kind of get a sense of the three-dimensional form of it by using shadowing, right? So that what used to be outline has quickly started to turn into edge-related drawing, which is really important. And also remember how I started this. I did that measuring. I measured the front-to-back relationship, and you always have to measure, and walked it across the width of it in order to maintain that 1 to 3 in this scenario. Now, depending how high your head is relative to the particular object you're drawing, a glass setting on a table, whatever, that front to back versus left to right of the circle, right, or the ellipse is going to be different every time. If your eye level was right down even with the top of the vessel, then you get a real thin sliver, right? The width wouldn't change, but the front to back would be really diminished. So, counter to that, if you're like floating right above the thing, right, looking straight down on it, it's almost a full circle at that point. So that would be almost a 1-to-1 relationship, front to back versus left to right. So I hope you can kind of understand here that when you're drawing a form such as this, kind of a curvilinear elliptical form, that you just can't rely on putting one mark down and call that the edge. Excuse me. You have to kind of hone it and develop it as a form, as a sense of surface catching light, for instance. So it's the corners, I like to call them corners, they aren't really corners, but the far left and right regions of this drawing are starting to get a little rounder looking as I develop the drawing. I tend to gravitate towards those tips being too pointed, so I always have to fight that. The other thing I always do, and most students do it too, I noticed, is make the back half too high. I do that all the time. So putting those lines down, kind of dividing this into quarters, right, that elliptical form, the opening, really forces you into maintaining a up-down symmetry to the ellipse. So you're not going to inherently make the back half too puffy or too high. Kind of cleaning things up here. Now in this scenario, the back, there's a light area right behind that dark area I'm coloring in right there, shading in. So I'm kind of just, in so much as this is a sketch, trying to indicate, generally speaking, the relationship between object and background, but not, specifically. And again, this took me probably an hour to draw, so, I sped it up over I guess into about a 12-minute video. So there's the foot of the bowl, right? Again, left, equal amount on left side, equal amount on right side. And of course that circle for the foot of the bowl is a little bit rounder, right? Because it's a smaller circle, number one. And meaning it's covering a smaller distance, left and right. and it's lower down. Okay, so it's going to be a little rounder because of that. As ellipses move downward from the horizon line, which is your eye level, they tend to round out a little bit, get rounder. You know, imagine them at eye level. It's almost a line straight across, right? So there's no curve at all at that point. And again, in so much as it's just as a, you know, a sketch, I'm not going to spend a ton of time developing the value relationships. You know, I could really beef up that front value in that shaded area. One reason that front is darker than the interior is because the light is kind of filtering downward, right? I'm just checking to make sure I have all my measurements right. I got that those corners are staying right across from one another on horizontal. But one reason the bowl is light on the inside is the light's filtering down, and those planes, you know, it's a convex surface in there, right? So that's catching the light. Whereas the outside of the bowl is a concave surface. It's being sheltered from the downward movement of the light. So that's one of the reasons why you're getting a shadow on the underside of the outside of the bowl. Yet, you know, if I really had time to develop this, there would be a you know, a little bit of reflected light under there as well. So I just didn't, you know, I haven't really not spending a lot of time on this drawing. So here I'm just kind of cleaning up the edges, a little pointed on the left side there. I kind of finished the drawing after the video was done, and I kind of overlaid it here, you'll see at the end. So I kind of rounded those out even more. But notice I'm not relying on outline, right? Even the top of the bowl, which is unresolved, you know, behind the bowl, the background, I've darkened it just enough to kind of create a push-pull, and i.e. then creating an edge, not an outline. So I think I'm kind of just about done with the sketch here. So there's kind of the finished view. Clean the edges up a little bit, maybe too much in terms of the thickness of the bowl, the lip of the bowl. Of course, that's catching some light. Maybe I could rake, you know, some more graphite over the lip of the bowl just to kind of calm that down a little bit. But I was able to round out the corners a little bit more, so I'm pretty happy with that. But remember, this is a circle seen in perspective. That's all an opening of a bowl or a cup or a plate or anything is. So it gets really tricky. You have to measure the front to back relationship versus the width, right? And find out how many you can fit into that width, and then you're able to create the ellipse. Okay, well, thank you very much.